Hey, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're watching this from. Uh, and welcome to a very special event. This is the first ever inaugural kickoff of what we're calling the weekly sprints for the LeanScaper community. And if you're here, congratulations. You're like a pioneer. You're in right at the ground floor, which there's going to be no better spot to be. And for us, it's also super exciting. The chance to connect and help companies grow in a different way than we've ever helped companies grow before. So we've always done webinars as part of our vast experience in LMN and lots of talks at trade show groups and lots of workshops. And I think both Mark and myself would agree that was one of the most rewarding parts of working with LMN, getting to actually talk to people face to face, make connections, answer questions, and be able to lend anything that we've learned over the past few years to somebody else so that they can benefit from that same knowledge and at the same time absorb that same knowledge from other people and be able to pass that on. And now, moving forward, we've got a community to help do that. And that's really what's behind the LeanScaper community. It is about raising the entire industry. I just want to talk about that first and foremost. Like, before we talk about even ourselves as individuals or the companies we work for, one thing that is crystal clear in our goals is to first raise the industry. And the best way to do that is by sharing best practices and things we've learned in that industry, which is full of people that want to learn and want to share. So it's just a great match. Secondary to that, obviously, we want to help you grow great businesses. I think landscaping is a great business. It's a great industry. It's not going anywhere. There's all kinds of potential. And as Mark will talk through the weeks and through other formats and live events, you're going to hear about his journey from starting a business to growing a really successful business to ending up exiting that business. And now that we've finished that journey and learned a lot of lessons along the way, how you can do that, maximizing your return at the end. Because without good knowledge of how that's best done, that can be a tough obstacle to climb. You're playing with people that have done this a lot, know way more about exits and acquisitions. And so again, for us, one of the goals is to help you build a more valuable business, because ultimately that's why we all go to work every day. And then as individuals, working in a landscape company can be challenging. There's communication challenges, which we're going to talk a lot about today, and there's success challenges, and there's career path challenges. And if we can take away a lot of those challenges and make it better, we're going to build an industry that's better, companies that better, and people that are happier at their work. So you're here in the accelerator program. This is the advanced portion of the LeanScaper program. And what we're going to be doing here in this particular event is over the next weeks, do exactly what we did at the landscape company, which was meet every single week to talk about something we need to do to get better, to become more efficient. We use a lot of lean practices in these meetings. We used to do it at the landscape company. Every week we'd talk about things with our crews. Here we are today talking about things as companies so that we can get together, focus on continuous improvement, ways to get lean, boost our profitability, but also build scalable and maybe sellable, or at least very well easy to pass onable. That's not a word, but you know what I mean. Businesses, so that we're building a business that's worth more, or even worth more to the people we want to hand it off to generational, as an example. So whether your blueprint is to dominate your market and just build a really profitable business, or whether your blueprint is to one day sell your business or hand it off to your employees or to other staff, this is the series for you. Week by week, we're going to help take you there. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce my co-host for today, Mark Bradley, and the founder of LeanScaper. Mark, I'll let you say hello.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the overview and explanation. As Mike pointed out, we're going to be here every week, 50 weeks a year. And what we're really planning to do is just embed one little, or could be very big, improvement each week in the business without making it ever super overwhelming, but really kind of delivering the how and the why to you and your leadership team in your company here each week on an improvement that we have found to work well in the past. And so what LeanScaper is a management operating system that we developed to grow our own top 100 landscape company. And really what we found is along the way, meeting every week, as Mike pointed out, it just gave us this opportunity to fix our biggest problems each week. And, when you do that over 50 weeks and you're following a system and a system that is already built, I think you get the opportunity to take a framework or an idea, put it into place in the company without having to create the framework, without having to create the assets, without having to even think about whether or not that's going to work. And then really just ultimately start using that improvement from that point forward. And so what we want to do is get together each week, focus on creating some change. And then each month we're going to get together, go a little bit deeper on what we're going to cover in the next month so that you and your leadership team know exactly what we're going to be talking about. And then what we're going to do is we're going to implement those changes on a 4-week cycle. And so we're using weekly sprint calls like this, 1 hour a week. And over 4 weeks, we're going to focus on implementing improvements in 4 key areas of the business. Those 4 key areas we call a balanced scorecard. So we're always going to be talking 1 week about financial improvements, 1 week about people and learning improvements, 1 week about efficiency, and then the next week we're going to be talking about customer-facing improvements. And that could be sales initiatives, it could be customer service initiatives, but just making that customer experience that much better each week. So what we're doing is continuously working on the business in all areas so that we're just always getting better. And so the LeanScaper Accelerator program can really just be defined by saying it's a continuous improvement program that you're going to be working on over the course of a year. And ideally, you're going to fix your biggest problems systemically rather than trying to face things emotionally when, the problems pop up. And I think that's often, in my experience, the pain that I went through growing the business was, dealing with the fires as they pop up and really getting caught in this vortex where I was just always working on the thing that seemed to be the problem. All the while, other problems were popping up because we didn't really get to the important things early enough. When we really started to implement lean in the business, what we found is by focusing on the balanced scorecard and really focusing on every component of the business and then creating meetings where we actually just did this consistently, what ended up happening is all of the problems that we were finding that were popping up, odds and ends, and just, the things that felt frustrating started to subside. Now, this doesn't happen overnight, but it generally happens a lot faster than you think. And what we're going to work on today, we're going to talk about meeting frameworks because the delivery mechanism for continuous improvement is meetings. And over the years, all of the years that I've taught workshops, and Mike, I'm sure you could probably comment the same. Whenever I go through my wins and wants, and many of you have probably attended some of the mastermind sessions, one common theme always arises. When it's the owners and the leaders in the business, they're always kind of saying, what we really want is accountability in our business. And when I hear that, I always kind of hear it and think of the other side. And I think I do this because I have done a lot of employee surveys over the years. And generally, the leaders want accountability, but the employees in the company that aren't yet at a management level, they generally want better communication. And so there's kind of this huge disconnect where the leaders want accountability and the staff want communication. And so I think what you do when you really create a meeting framework for your business, you really kind of solve both. You create the accountability that the leadership is looking for, but you also give that communication and those feedback loops to the staff that are doing the work so that they actually, first off, know what good looks like. But secondly, they feel supported, and then therefore they can be accountable to something. But more often than not, a lot of times people just aren't sure what they're being held accountable to because there isn't enough meetings in the business. And in my own landscape company, this was a plague for us, not having enough meetings to actually relay information and get consistency and really explain what good looks like, and then train people to a standard, and then give them some feedback to let them know how things are going, where they're going really well, and then, what we're going to work on next. Not having meetings makes that impossible. So it kind of happens just one conversation at a time. And today, the reason we're going to kind of start with meeting frameworks, everything we're going to do over the next 52 weeks together relies upon meetings, because we're going to meet with you and your leadership team here. What we're going to do is we're going to show you the how, the why of a system or a procedure or a thing that we're going to do different in the business. That's going to take us an hour each week. Your meeting structure is really going to be the delivery mechanism. We don't want you to have extra meetings or spend all kinds of time building new systems. We're giving you turnkey systems here in this 1 hour. And this is your alignment meeting for your leadership team to come together, hear this message. I'm going to act like your virtual CEO each week. I'm preparing this content. I'm delivering this content. You're going to go ahead and consume it, understand it, decide how you want to use it or if you want to use it in your business. And then in your routine weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual meetings, you're going to actually use the frameworks that we're talking about to become your new reality. And so we're not really asking you to do anything specific to this. What we're asking you to do to deploy this management operating system is have regular meetings. And every company needs them. Every successful business in the world has some company meetings, they have some department meetings, they have some one-to-one meetings, and that's really what we're here to talk about today. So as we go through the information today, what I want to really just point out is Mike and I are both here for a reason. We really want to make this conversational. You've probably heard me say that many times. Most of you have probably been in the room with either Mike or I over the years at a workshop or at a seminar or online for a webinar. One of the more recent years, we've been doing the mastermind programs. We really like conversation. So feel free to ask questions as we go. We don't really want this to be one way. Obviously, this is a one-to-many delivery mechanism, so we can't have open conversation or it'll get chaotic. But we definitely want to hear from you. So jump in the chat, ask your questions. As we're going through things, feel free to ask for more clarification. Mike will pause and ask me or vice versa. We'll make sure that we give you as much information as we can as we work through the information today. And then as a follow-up, these first 3 sessions, we're actually doing these for free. So some of you have probably already paid. You'll get 3 extra free sessions at the end of your contract. Those of you that are just, kicking the tires and checking out to see what this is all about, this is a brand new concept. We're not competing with peer groups. It's certainly not a replacement for peer groups. We're huge believers in CEO peer groups, and we would advise everybody here to join them. We're not competing with a software company. We're not competing with anything. This is a different opportunity that I don't think has existed before in the business. It's really us just taking our way of doing business and showing you how to do it over 50 weeks. And that requires a little bit of help along the way. And so I definitely want to introduce 2 of our guides here today, Dave Ellis and Aaron Strait. They're on the line. They are here to help anytime. The reason we call them guides is here at LeanScaper, when you sign up, you get assigned a guide. And that guide stays with you. They're there to help you deploy the LeanScaper operating system. They're there to help you find advisors to help you solve any of the problems that might arise as part of going through such a transformation. If you don't have really good financial controls, maybe you need a little help with marketing, or you need help finding and hiring people. Maybe you need a little bit of help deploying your software. Maybe you're using LMN and you need an advisor to help get that set up right. We're here to really help find and connect you up with the advisors to make this become a reality. And the advisors that we're recommending are all LeanScaper certified, and we're recommending them because they understand what we're doing here each week. They're traveling along with us week to week. They're coming out to mastermind events. They've been trained to use the operating system that we coach to. And so your guide can really help you get connected up with the services to make all of this a little bit easier along the way. So as we go through everything, always remember, ask lots of questions. Always feel free to go back to your guide and get some advice. We're just all here to help guide you through this transformation that you're really facing in the business. Mike, any comments or questions there that we should cover before we jump into this week's topic?
Yeah, no, all good so far. We'll jump in as we're getting tight on time. Just sort of a procedural issue. You guys have all figured it out already. Use the chat. There's a few going in Q&A as well, so we'll get caught up on all of those. As you're asking questions, I'm trying to write some down that I'll come back to when it's sort of appropriate or when the windows go. So keep it coming. You know, obviously I don't want to interrupt anybody in the middle of a sentence. But as long as you bring the questions in, I will do my best to interject them at the times that make the most sense. So keep those things coming. And then whatever we don't do, we'll get to after, as they mentioned in the chat. Other than that, Mark, sounds good.
Oops, I just realized I hit some buttons. Excuse me. Also been struggling with a little bit of a virus, but I'll try to keep rolling. The LeanScaper operating system really does rely on those meetings, as I pointed out. So I thought for week one, let's really just talk about meetings, why they're so important, and what meetings we recommend deploying in the business to really become a continuous improvement organization. Now, naturally, we have to spend time with each other, and we have to talk about specific things if we actually want to create a common language or a common lens on the business. And the reason that we recommend the meeting framework that we're showing is we know that meetings have to happen in many areas of the business, and they have to be happening on a recurring basis, and they have to be happening in different departments, but also kind of all pointing back to the same topics. And so regardless of whether you're a small startup with 3 people or a massive company with 300 or 3,000, these meetings actually do need to take place. Now, who holds meetings, the title of the meetings may vary a bit based on your company size and the roles or even the segment that you serve. But generally, what we're showing with this framework is a way of actually creating organizational alignment. That's really the goal here. And so we want to be able to measure what we're doing. We want to be able to give feedback. And then we want to use every meeting that we have as a continuous improvement meeting. So you'll definitely see a very different approach to the meetings in the sense that most of our meetings are just simply going to start out with, here's our results and here's our plan. Are we ahead or are we behind? And now let's move on and talk about what we can do to get better. And what this does is it kind of creates this almost this trust in the business that becomes very sort of natural, because we're never coming along and saying, hey, you're really far behind or you haven't done your job. Instead, we're actually meeting so frequently that together we're just looking at metrics in real time all the time, and we're just optimizing and turning the dials. And so that creates a really strong connection between everybody in the company. And I think it really builds this trust that often doesn't exist because there's so much alignment around continuous improvement. We're never really coming at things from a negative perspective. We're always kind of coming at them from a positive perspective, and we're being proactive because we're meeting as frequently as we are. So it may seem like a lot of meetings at first, but what I'll say is it actually eliminates a lot of the ad hoc meetings that you end up having because you're always putting out fires. You kind of have to run here and there and everywhere and have all of these small meetings because you're reacting to problems in the business. When you get really proactive and you have ongoing meetings, you're meeting about the big problems at a predetermined time with recurring meetings. And then that frees up a lot more block time to work on other things that are a lot more valuable than running around in circles putting out fires. So the scorecard. Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Just going to say too, such a good way to prevent those big problems from even manifesting, right? As you have these meetings often, you're sharing goals, you're aligning everybody along this, and then they prioritize their day to prevent those big problems from even happening. They know what the most important things are. And then when they are faced, like we all are every day, with should I do this? Should I do this? Or where do I put my attention? You can do that in the areas that are going to have the biggest impact. And so end up not even having the bigger problems that you would need to have meetings for, because they just never happened in the first place.
That was definitely what we found. I mean, I think we were incredibly reactive in the early years, and I'm always the first to say it was never perfect. It just gets better. And what I really found was when we started to focus on waste elimination and we had a common language in the business, then everybody wanted to hear about metrics, and they wanted to hear about metrics more often. And that's really what we want to talk about here today, is creating good meeting agendas, good meeting cadences, so that we can actually focus on these LeanScaper core objectives. And those objectives in our business are always going to be the same. The LeanScaper 5 core objectives are financial growth, team development, operational excellence, customer satisfaction, and being the best brand in the market. And we use the balanced scorecard to measure this. That the balanced scorecard is just a feedback mechanism that allows us to, first off, set some targets, and then secondly, just review them on an ongoing basis. So it becomes the way of actually reflecting on reality. So the LeanScaper balanced scorecard is just this little snapshot that tells us how we're doing against these objectives that we're pointing out here, right here. Now, what does this end up looking like? Ultimately, these meetings are focused around waste elimination, empowering teams, giving them the information they need to go out and drive some change, creating more value for the customer, all by optimizing processes. We're just constantly trying to make each process a little bit better. The things that are annoying, the flow interruptions, the things that are holding us back, we're just talking about those on a more regular basis. And so as we kick off each week, what you'll notice that we're going to do is we're going to go through and talk about the 5 W's and an H for anything we're going to release. And so the who, what, why, where, when, and how of anything we're ever talking about in these sprints will be covered right here off the start. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to show you the procedure, the document, the framework that supports what it is we're suggesting you do, so that you can just go ahead and put this into action in your business right away. And again, over 50 weeks, we're going to put some frameworks and some standard operating procedures in place that are going to drive accountability, and more than anything, really add more value to the customer and put much better business results onto the bottom line. And so who benefits? Really, ultimately, everybody benefits from this meeting framework that we're about to talk about. Leadership is obviously the foundation. The strategy starts with the leadership team. And that strategy needs to make it to the managers in a very functioning way, in a way where the managers know what the strategy is and how to go out and actually get that strategy to become a reality. And those are execution plans. And then obviously there's the most important people in the company are the frontline people that are out doing the work. And crew leaders often really don't understand the strategy that the leadership has put in place, and they don't really get clear execution plans from managers. So they really suffer and I think feel the brunt of everything. And when there isn't very good meetings in the company, I think all 3 levels feel a little bit lost, and I think definitely a little bit disconnected, which is where most of, in my experience, where most of the inefficiency comes from. And I think when we hear the field staff saying there's no communication, and we hear the leadership saying there's really not much accountability, it's really the disconnect that comes between the leadership team and the crew leaders. And in order to fix it, you have to have meetings. And sometimes people are afraid to have meetings because they think they're expensive, or they think that, it's going to slow down production. And I'm here to really challenge that. I can tell you for sure that the more meetings that you have, the faster everybody moves, because there's fewer questions and there's much fewer mistakes. We don't have this 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And I think Mike could really attest to this. back in the day when we were growing the landscape company exponentially, his job was the director of operations. And when he first came on, I was out there pushing growth like crazy, and we didn't have a lot of middle management, and the frontline teams were starting to really falter on productivity and quality and safety, and everything was starting to break. And Mike was there in the middle as the manager trying to piece it all together without us having enough meetings. And therefore, he was just kind of working 14, 16, 18 hours a day, trying to make up for the fact that our strategy wasn't really being deployed in a systematic way. Mike, maybe you can kind of speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, super accurate. And I'm going to call back to Gary asked a question earlier, right near the beginning about, Mark, you talked about 200 hours a year in training and how do you accommodate that with like a busy production schedule, and how do you get new hires up to speed? And all of that, I think, is a very similar conversation. Mark's exactly right. Super reactive in that period. And to Mark's point, we were growing. The year I started, we signed a job that was as big, one job that was as big as the entire company. So we had all our existing portfolio plus this new job that was incredibly demanding. And to Mark's point, it started at 6 a.m. and it was 5:30 and then it was 5 a.m. just trying to deal with the volume. But it wasn't just frustrating for us, it was frustrating for the crew leads too, who were getting deployed, expected to manage their job. I mean, that was another thing we were really pushing up. Like, you're responsible for managing your job, but we were reacting, moving people to jobs so quickly, or schedules changing, that it just became really frustrating for everybody. And you could do it, you could stay on top of it if you put a bunch of non-working hours into it. The meetings had an incredible advantage. But Greg, like, not right away. So when we did the meetings in the first year, we did like weekly meetings about lean and waste elimination. So even right away, we weren't exactly talking about day-to-day operations. We were talking about the principles that we were going to run the company on. And at the end of that year, I remember saying to Mark, I'm not sure it was worth it. Maybe we should have just kept working and we would have done more revenue. Mark said, no, keep going. And if you looked at our revenue per person in that year, it really didn't change. But 3 years later, 2 years later, in fact, 2 years after that first year, we were staring down a barrel of a company that was doing twice the revenue per person that it used to do. So it did have an impact. First was about establishing those common practices and common language. Then we started sharing them. Each week, a crew would present a best practice that they were doing so that everybody could learn from that. And that over time just built this momentum. Common language, common framework, common organization of trailers, common way jobs got to a common set of information that's going to crews. And again, not immediately. So Greg, if your question is like 200 hours a year training, how's that going to pay itself back this year? It might not this year, and it might break. I'm confident you'll be neutral, but I'm not saying you'll do it. But I bet you next year and the year after, you're looking down a new company. And then when you ask yourself, how do we get new hires up to speed? Well, when everybody else on the crew is working out of a trailer that's organized the same, that is working for a very similar set of information, that has a very systematic way of asking questions to get that information, you're going to find the needs of that training drop off a lot. And you're going to find people are happier. New hires are going to be like, I've never worked for a company this organized before, which right off the bat, you're going to find, whether it's you pay a lot more. And Scott, you asked that question earlier, right? Where do I find new employees? Well, maybe the best place to start is, how do I stop needing to find new employees? Because they're just happier working in a company that's A, organized, and B, successful, according to the metrics that we're now talking about every week.
And what I would really say, just to layer onto that, is, Mike, our first year, 2 years, 3 years, we were building this system. So I wouldn't say that it was as effective as we would have liked in the first year, because we had to build this and we had to test it, iterate upon it. This is really what you're getting here over the course of this year, is the result of what we learned after 15 years. So you're probably skipping a few steps. I think what you'll notice is you'll see very, very keen uptake from the staff when you start bringing people to ongoing meetings and you're speaking about the problems that they're facing every day. They tend to get really engaged, and you see a lot of intangible improvements. But I think you'll find that the estimated versus actual hours conversation perks up. You'll probably start to see waste elimination conversations coming at you that you've never had before. you'll probably start to see the culture really start to shift from one where I'm not sure where or who to talk to about this problem, to one where every week you're hearing about problems. And I'll say that in itself, these meetings at first may feel a little bit stressful in the sense that you're hearing about problems that people didn't talk about in the past. And I think that's really one of the big shifts that I've found in many of the companies that I do some one-to-one coaching with, and I've gone through this with them. They tend to notice that at first it's a little overwhelming, because when you teach everybody how to identify waste, and when you start to talk about just how much it's holding back the company, you get a lot of feedback, and that feedback can be a bit overwhelming. So wanted to point out a few things like that as we kick off here. But I think, moving forward, what are these lean meeting frameworks? Ultimately, every company has to have meetings in place. We need daily huddles so that people know what is happening in the moment. We need weekly tactical meetings where we're reviewing the metrics, we're looking at how things are going, we're talking about our biggest problems. And the reason we want to do this is if every crew or every department is meeting every week and they're actually talking about their biggest problem and they're facing it and they're actually implementing improvements, then what happens is after 50 weeks or a whole year, you've kind of taken your 50 biggest problems and you've eliminated them. And when companies don't meet and they don't talk and these big problems kind of just linger, you live with it, and that becomes the way it is in your company. And usually it's not that good. And so when we hear the leaders saying there's no accountability, and we hear everybody else in the company saying there's no communication, we can kind of be sure that's because we don't have daily huddles and tactical meetings where we just face the things that we all know need to be fixed. And then we don't really have that opportunity to commit to a timeline and make it happen. And that's really the point of the weekly tactical meeting is, hey, what is our biggest problem in this department or in the company or a crew? Let's tackle that. Let's figure out what we need to do. And let's use lean as a framework to overcome these problems that we have in the business. Monthly improvement meetings, these are a little bit longer. Weekly tactical meetings tend to be an hour. And, the question of how do we pay for all of this? The question is, you put it in your budget. You always budget for the time that you spend in meetings and training. And when I say 200 hours a year, I'm talking about actual trainings and actual continuous improvement meetings, because both are part of training. Meetings are a key component of training your team. And so I often try to tell people, put 200 hours a year of time in for everyone in the company to attend planning meetings, to attend strategy sessions, to attend training. And that was really the question that came up earlier. So we want to have some daily huddles. We want to have weekly tactical meetings. Every month we want to get together and we want to go deep into improvements, the things that are really holding us back. Each week when we're identifying major flow interruptions or problems or resourcing issues or skills gaps in the business, we want to pull that forward, and then in a monthly meeting, spend 2 to 3 hours and really map out the process that might be affected, create a better version of that process, turn that into a standard operating procedure, and then roll that out to everybody else in the company via the daily huddles and the weekly tactical meetings. So our big improvements are made at monthly meetings, and then we deliver those improvements out and make it standard in our daily huddles and weekly tactical meetings. So you can kind of see a theme here. We're using the improvement meetings to create the big improvements, and we're using daily huddles and weekly as this delivery mechanism that just is always alive and well. Now, quarterly strategic reviews, these are really an opportunity for us to set goals, and we want to set our goals each quarter, and then we want to create smart goals that are time bound. And so by making them quarterly and actually doing a quarterly strategic meeting, what we get to do is look at last quarter's goals and results, and then set some more realistic or more relative goals for the next quarter. And what we're doing is we're always planning a quarter out so that we're always building SMART goals that serve the annual goal that we put in front of us for the company. And that annual goal is built at this annual summit or annual strategic planning meeting. And what this meeting is designed to do is really just give us a chance to reflect on the previous year and create the plan for the whole year ahead. And so when you kind of think about it, annual meetings, we're setting the plan. Quarterly, we're really adjusting that plan. Monthly, we're driving the improvements. And then weekly and daily, we're dealing with all the day-to-day tactical issues. We're delivering on that strategy that we've created and cascaded down from the year to the quarter to the month. And we're making sure that everybody actually understands what we're doing, how we're doing, and where those big problems are to move forward. Mike, anything to add here?
No, other than I was just going to type in the chat there, just like my favorite meeting of that, the quarterlies. Like if you're not doing the quarterlies were key to learning. Every quarter, it's like you're facing down what you set last quarter. You're looking at it and saying, was it the right goal? Did it drive the behaviors that we wanted? Is it structured in a way that's easy to measure? And then we pivot or tweak that a bit for the next quarter. But I think you're far more likely to hit your annual goals if you're not skipping that quarterly one. The quarterly was my personal favorite because that's the one where we did set and reset the goals every quarter. And that was your opportunity to learn before the whole year was over that we didn't do it correctly or could have done it better or need a better way to track it, whatever the scenario is.
Absolutely. So, ultimately, oftentimes people ask me, hey, what's lean, or why do I need lean in my landscape business? And we've talked about lean for a lot of years. We actually built LMN as a lean initiative. When we first started building LMN, it was so that we had a feedback mechanism. We really wanted estimated versus actual hours in real time. We wanted to be able to share our job plans with our field crews. We wanted to be able to estimate really consistently, get some accurate job costing data so that we could get better at estimating in the future and create production rates. And all of these things were tied directly to our lean project. And so when we started to really look at the why lean, for us, it was let's eliminate waste and let's turn that waste into higher wages, better profits, and better customer experience. Ultimately, we were feeling the pinch in all three areas. We were feeling like productivity had started to slip. We weren't really having any big safety issues, but clearly there was some problems with quality. I was starting to really notice that for the first time ever, as the business was scaling, that we were doing things twice or doing things three times. It was like kind of 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Quality started to suffer. Next, after quality suffers, naturally, the customers are starting to feel the problems that we have internally on their properties or businesses. And so what we really started to think of is, let's focus on just getting better using the lean methodology. And let's start by getting really focused on eliminating waste and just creating more value for the customers. And so that meant higher quality, and that meant finding the waste in everything that we do, talking about it, and then just changing our systems so that we get better. And then on the creating value side, making sure that the customer is getting what they say we said we're going to do and getting it consistently. And so that kind of became a mantra. We do what we say and we say what we do. And ultimately, I think lean for us was all about just eliminating that waste and giving the customers what they paid for. Now, the big byproduct of this is our employees had an opportunity to learn how to win, because we were talking about metrics and we were talking about quality and we were talking about customer expectations. And so what it does is it builds better people systemically. And so lean is really a way of building people. And when you build people, then you build a great company. And so build the people, build the company. Lean is really the delivery mechanism for both. And what it allowed for us was, as Mike pointed out, sustainable growth. A year after year, it just kept getting better and better and better, which meant we could pay our staff higher wages. We had more profit to reinvest in the business, and our customers loved us. So we didn't have the turnover. It allowed us to have fewer customers, serve them really well, and then build these people who are able to perform the work without me or Mike or anybody on the leadership team being right there to tell them all the answers. So when do these things happen? They happen on a schedule. And the first thing that I'm going to recommend as we deliver this framework here today is you take this framework and you put it into action in your business by creating recurring meetings. Now, you figure out who you need to attend all the meetings, and the framework makes that very easy to do. And then you actually create the meeting invites and you make them recurring, and they never end. So the daily meetings, the weekly meetings, monthly, quarterly, and annual, you plan out your whole year. And when you plan out the whole year and you use recurring meetings and you invite everybody using recurring meetings, you immediately create what I call group flow. Everybody in the business now has a regular cadence of getting their communication and being held accountable. And so the delivery mechanism to communication and accountability is your meeting cadence. Oftentimes when people tell me they don't have good accountability or communication, I ask about the meetings and almost instantly find out they don't really have any. Or if they do, they happen ad hoc or on an unusual schedule. It's just intermittent. Well, naturally, you're not going to have accountability or good communication if you don't do it regularly. And so you have to learn to take the meeting schedule, identify who's going to attend, build a recurring meeting invite, and then deploy it. And so you can do this today. This doesn't take long. You can deploy your meeting system, which is the base of everything that we're going to teach over the next year, just following the framework that we're about to cover here next. Mike, did you want to kind of give a little bit of an overview here on, what the Lean meeting frameworks cover?
Yeah, for sure. Ours evolved over time, as Mark said, and I probably don't think about it that often. You're right, very much an evolution and process. To Mark's point, we did start with nothing. But I think as I go through what's on some of the slides here, I'll try to harken it back to our own meetings. First and really important was training staff on lean principles and sharing a common language and sharing common principles with that. Maverick, I believe, asked earlier about Six Sigma training and would it be valuable? And like 100%, yes. But also what's really valuable is taking those practices and making them tangible or understandable to our industry. A lot of them are built for manufacturing, which is totally good. The key is grabbing that parallel and bringing it over. And that's what we tried to do in that meeting. We used the Toyota way. We didn't use Six Sigma exactly, similar, but not exactly. And the Toyota way has a book called the Toyota Way Handbook. And it's very much a workbook written for people in manufacturing on how to implement lean. And so we took that and we tweaked it for landscape contracting. And that was the first thing. It was like, hey, let's teach everybody what waste and efficiency is. And then as we started understanding that and why it's important came back to generating more revenue and higher wages for everybody that worked there. Then we could start getting into key metrics. Now people understood why the key metrics were important, whether it was hours or crew efficiency or how much revenue a crew was doing each year. And so those became conversations for crew leads that we were never having those conversations 2 years before. How much revenue should I do in a year was nothing that we thought should have been, well, could have been talked about is maybe the right word. But then all of a sudden, once people understood that I have goals or we have goals in order to hit the company goals, and we can hit these goals if we have these elimination and efficiency practices in place, people were interested. I think Mark used the word either curious and eager to know the metrics that they were scoring, because now they understood the impact it was having on the business and the impact it was having on their career. And then, of course, there's 1,000 things we're doing that we could do better. So it was starting like these 52-week sprints here, starting by tackling one inefficiency at a time. And I think what a lot of you will find is like there's 1,000 things, but there's probably 20 to 50 of them that are causing your biggest issues. So great, let's focus our attention on those. You don't have to get 1/1000th better every week. You're going to get better a lot quicker because you're going to tackle the things that are the biggest, which will make the most significant improvements, hopefully in the short term. And then it was about putting lean tools into play. So really important that we practiced what we preached. We hung signs from the walls. We reorganized the shop. We labeled everything in the trailers. We standardized the way that was trailers so that they knew this wasn't just a meeting. This was a new operating system for our landscape company, an operating system we expected crew leads to push out to their crews every day. And then, of course, the feedback and adjust. So eventually meetings started to turn into like a discussion. I brought up the crew frustration earlier, and in my head was the schedule one, right? So one day we had a whole meeting about crews saying, hey, in order to get better at planning our jobs, we need better schedules, and us having to describe why schedules change and why it's not deliberate. And there's 8 reasons that we change schedules. And so then having these discussions, talking about what we could do better, having crews once a week, it was super simple, right? Every week we had, I don't know, 9 crews at the time. Every crew was responsible once a week. Sorry, each one crew was responsible once a week. So every 9 weeks to bring forth an improvement that they'd done in their process or improvement so that everybody could learn for it. These weren't complicated things to do. They just required time and dedication, and soon became the way we ran the business, which was awesome.
To kind of layer on to the question that you mentioned, you don't have to take any other training outside of what we're doing. We've taken what we learned over the 15 years and we're delivering that training here. So you don't need to go and take a Six Sigma training, and you don't need to read the Toyota way, and you don't need to go anywhere else. We're giving you a turnkey delivery mechanism to run a lean business. So that hopefully that simplifies things. We're never going to point you to go read another book or take another course. We know that the industry's filled with coaches doing that, and we really just wanted to give you a turnkey management operating system. You come here, you take the 1 hour, we give you the framework, you deploy it. You don't have to read anything else or take any other training. We did that over 15 years. We know how hard it is to do that. We know that that's next to impossible to do while you're running the operation. This is really us giving you that recipe on the fly. As we kind of, sorry, having a problem advancing my slides here for some reason. Held up on me. Okay, so let's jump right into the actual framework that we're going to talk about for this week. So each week we're going to review the slides that we are proposing just to kind of explain what we're talking about for the week. And then we're going to roll through the framework that we're actually releasing to support it. And this is really what eliminates a lot of the day-to-day questions and work and creativity to build the system. This is the management operating system. The foundational piece is the meeting framework. And so again, what are we focused on with this framework? We're focused on optimizing 5 key areas of the business. And so we've created 5 core objectives: 1, financial growth; 1, team development; 1, operational excellence; customer satisfaction; and brand recognition. And so, I always say, try to build the company that you want to become in the future and be that company that nobody wants to ever compete with. And the best way of thinking of that is, I want to build the company that I would hate to ever want to compete with. And so ask yourself, when you're building some of the improvements into the business, that question. Ask, what impact is this going to have on my ability to be competitive, to be most profitable, to be the highest paying company, to be the most efficient, to be the most skilled, to have the happiest customers, to have the best brand, and think, wow, if I could actually optimize all 5 areas, I'd hate to have to compete with me. I think that's a good little way to consider if these things are worth doing. Now, as I've pointed out here on the screen, what gets talked about in meetings gets done. And when you don't have meetings, you forget about these things. And so the reason we make them recurring is we're trying to build a muscle. We're trying to build this organizational muscle where all of our plans become a reality because we meet about them every week. We raise everybody else's awareness. And not only do we raise the awareness, but we actually explain what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it, and then we make sure that everybody understands how to win. And so as we go through this meeting framework here today, just keep in mind that there's 4 levels of meetings. The first level is going to be leadership meetings. Then there's going to be department meetings, or sometimes people call those functional meetings. We're going to have field meetings, field crew meetings specifically. And then we're going to talk about one-to-one meetings. And again, we recommend that you build this meeting cadence out using automated reminders by sending out calendar invites that are recurring. And so we want to decide who's going to attend each meeting, create the meeting invite for the whole year, make it endless. It'll just keep going even past that year. And what we want to do is then use the agendas that we have laid out in this framework to guide us as we do all of those meetings. And those meeting structures are really what Mike and I had to build out in order to build our continuous improvement program. So this truly is the foundation of that program. And as I said earlier, it took us many years to figure this out, but it worked incredibly well and it's very scalable. So I have small, startup operators using this all the way up to some of the biggest and best in the industry. And what they always come back and tell me is, it looked like a lot when I read the framework, but as soon as I sent out the invites, I realized I was already finished with the framework. All I was doing at that point was just using the agendas. And so what I like to tell people is send out the recurring meetings and then also put the agendas in the recurring meetings so that people know what you're going to be there to talk about. So again, the leadership level meetings, this is where you're really setting the strategy. This is where the leadership comes together and they decide what the top line goals are in each of those objectives that we talked about earlier, which we're going to be working on that together here over the next couple of weeks. We're going to learn to set goals that create strategic alignment. That's what we're going to move on to. We need this framework in place first, but we're going to move on to setting goals next. Now, what we do with this strategic alignment is we set metrics that we can then reflect back upon on an ongoing basis to see if it's working. And so the leadership meetings are setting strategy, setting metrics, and then we're going to just keep working these leadership meetings on an ongoing basis by doing weekly leadership meetings, monthly leadership meetings, quarterly leadership meetings, and we're also going to be doing an annual strategic planning meeting. So it sounds like a lot, but it's really not that much. What we're trying to do here is make sure that we're dealing with the tactical issues each week, that we're really focused on looking at the lean scoreboard, making sure that we're on track, and where we're not on track, we're going to talk about it so that we never get really far off track. And then we're going to look at our SMART goals, see how we're doing, and then we're going to jump into a problem solving session. And we're going to do this every week as a leadership team. And we're going to solve our biggest problems by doing so. And so at the end of the year, you've taken your 50 biggest problems and you've systematically eliminated them, all because you've had some meetings. At the monthly meeting, we're going to go a little bit deeper. The things that we uncover in the tactical weekly meetings, we're going to go deeper and we're going to kind of solve for some of those problems by really rolling our sleeves up and creating some improvements that can then be rolled out through the field staff meetings to make sure that these things actually become a reality. And so the connectedness between all of the meetings at the different levels really are the delivery mechanism. At the leadership level, we talk about the strategy and we create the plans. And then at the department level, those get put into action. And in the field crew meetings, they're really out there hearing about it and learning exactly what the strategy is, and they're seeing the feedback coming down from the leadership team. Quarterly meetings, we're going to be resetting our goals. Then at annual meetings, we're setting our strategy for the year. And again, these agendas are all in here for you so that you've got the framework that we used for continuous improvement. So there's no guesswork. There's no showing up to meetings saying, what do we talk about, or what is this meeting about? This is all completed for you as part of this agenda. So what I would do is set the recurring meetings, pull this agenda, put it right in the meeting invite so that everybody knows what it's about. And on an ongoing basis, you'll probably put some tweaks and your own spin on some of these meeting agendas, and that's just fine. Just go ahead and update the recurring meeting, and that way you've always got a very consistent approach to your meetings. Because for me, I think one of the big reasons I didn't like meetings early in my career was because I didn't know how to set the agenda, what to talk about, and so it always felt like a waste of time because we just weren't really consistent enough for it to build value over time. The department meetings, now again, leadership is setting strategy, they're creating plans, and they're dispatching those over to the departments. We have to have department meetings also happening weekly. And so whoever the leaders are, and it may be you as the owner if you're a startup or a smaller operation, or maybe you have functional leaders that run sales and run operations. And so regardless, we want to have these meetings. If it's a smaller company, sometimes the sales and operations meetings they kind of blend into the leadership meeting. So you may not have secondary meetings for the departments because you don't have departments yet. And that's completely fine. I'm not suggesting you hold all of these meetings if you don't have these departments. You'll just kind of merge them into your leadership meeting. But if you do have these departments, it's really important that you have a meeting structure to maintain consistency in each team and connect them back to that leadership team. So sales team weekly meetings, that's going to be one that we're definitely going to want to review. Again, the agenda's in here, the metrics that we're going to start with. We're going to always start our meetings with metrics, and then we're going to talk about the actual things that drive the metrics. So in the case of sales, we're going to talk about the metrics. We're going to talk about the pipeline. Then we're going to move on to some problem solving so that we can get some better results in any area that might be lagging a little bit. Again, marketing, you probably don't have a marketing team. This isn't very common in the landscape business, but ideally you've got a marketing advisor. And so let's put a monthly meeting on the board, and we're working with an agency or an advisor to make sure that we're actually focused enough on improving our brand presence, improving our website, improving the lead generation that we might have in place. And that requires a meeting. And so I always recommend a marketing meeting. Clearly, we've got operations in every business. And so I would highly recommend an operations team meeting, regardless of if you're a smaller company or a larger, because this meeting is really all about really operationalizing a lot of the improvements that we're looking at putting in place. First, we're looking at the key metrics and the most important metrics in the whole company: job completion times. Are we getting the estimated versus actual hours on time? How are we really looking at the job costs? Things going well, not going well? And then we're really value stream mapping to say, hey, we've got a broken process. We're consistently getting late material deliveries. We're consistently wasting time fueling our trucks. We're consistently lacking inventory in our job site trailers, or we're consistently short on tools. Whatever that immediate problem is, we're trying to solve those in the moment. And so we need these meetings to do that really efficiently. Finance team meetings. This is where we're looking at the financial metrics. Again, you may be outsourcing to a third-party bookkeeping service, or maybe to a fractional CFO, or maybe you've got a well-built-out team. In any case, we should be talking about the metrics frequently. At the very least, we're going to want to be doing this bi-weekly. I don't think you ever want to be just looking at metrics, financial metrics monthly. So we're going to want a little bit more, if anything. Now, next up, we're going to talk about one-to-one meetings. So we've got department meetings, a few others just to talk about, weekly project management meetings. We're going to be looking at meetings for account managers. We're going to be looking at functional meetings, like maybe your maintenance department or your design build department. And so the framework's all here. This document's here for you to download. It's in the community. Out in the field, though, there's a very different set of meetings that I think often are highly overlooked. And this is really where the rubber meets the road. So again, we've got our company level meetings for the leadership team and department level meetings to kind of hone in on what needs to happen in each area of the business. But where the rubber meets the road, we all know, is out in the field. And oftentimes there isn't a really good framework in place for the field to meet. And this is an important one. We want to be able to do a daily crew huddle. We definitely want to be able to have weekly and monthly meetings with our field crews. We want to follow a framework to do that. We want to create a continuous improvement program, which we're going to go far more in depth on what these meetings look like and how to deploy them. These are some of the things we're going to be covering on the quarterly intensive in-person and online events. We're going to go super deep into the how and why behind some of these meetings and how to run them. But these agendas are here for you to schedule this out for the full year. And we're going to spend time each week explaining how to run some of these meetings, how to utilize the metrics that we're discussing in these meeting agendas to really drive that efficiency through in the business. So as you go through this framework, keep this in mind. The last area that I'll kind of jump into is one-to-one meetings. We're big believers in one-to-one meetings. We've seen the transition that this can have in any business. Definitely with the companies that I do some coaching in my own company, I've always found most of the day-to-day improvement of people, growing people, comes from the quality of the one-to-one meetings. And so the one-to-ones that we recommend are all laid out here in the framework as well. What the reasoning is, what the agenda looks like, what the timeline looks like for these meetings. We keep them pretty tight. We keep them pretty efficient. The goal of a one-to-one is always just to drive that continuous improvement culture deep, but it's also to fix the little things on the fly so that we don't have all the fires to put out day to day. And so the frameworks that we put in place for one-to-ones, there's suggestions in here for different types of titles: sales managers, account managers. We've got ops manager one-to-ones. There's finance managers, project managers, field crew leaders. These one-to-one meetings are designed to optimize your managers so that they get an opportunity to come back and actually give you a little bit of feedback on how things are going. And this is you simply saying in a meeting, hey, how are things going? What's happening this week? What are your big challenges or roadblocks? And it's giving them a forum to actually have that difficult conversation that they never get a chance to have. And so these become the coaching moments. This is where we actually reflect on the metrics together, and we actually talk about how to improve or how to grow in any one area. So again, we've got lots of samples in here, whether it's for project managers, designers, salespeople, account managers, the rates, the metrics that we're going to discuss in each of those areas. It's all in this framework to help you create the recurring meetings and the agendas for those meetings. It's all here in one doc. You can go ahead and review this doc on your own. We'll talk about this on an ongoing basis. This framework is a foundational framework, so it's very big, very extensive. This is going to be one that we really call back to throughout the entire journey of LeanScaper. We're always going to be using this meeting framework as the delivery mechanism for all of the improvements that we're putting in place in your business. I think we're out of time. This was a big one. This week is definitely probably one of the more in-depth frameworks that we're going to be covering. A lot of the weekly sprint calls are going to be a little smaller, more iterative improvements. This is a big change for companies, so we thought we'd really go deep and explain why these meetings are so important and give you a really well built out framework to consider how to deploy. So Please, I know we're a little out of time. If you've got any questions, always feel free to hit me up over email, mark@leanscaper.com, or mike@leanscaper.com. Hit us up on LinkedIn, hit us up in the community. The community's there for you. We really want to be as conversational as possible and drive a lot of conversation there so that everybody can take part and learn all in one place. So again, thanks for joining this week. I hope you got some value. This has been a long time coming. As I went out doing the Mastermind series the past few years, I had more questions about meeting frameworks than anything else, because I always talk about how important meetings are for accountability and communication, which tend to be the two biggest wants when we review the 3 W's, the wins, the working, and wants. It's always communication and accountability. This is that delivery mechanism. Thanks for joining this week, and feel free to reach out.